Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Understanding Power. Our presenter is Nicole Nash-Arnold. Nicole is a nurse educator and facilitator who helps transform accomplished clinical nurses into empowered and respected leaders. She shares her 15 years of experience in senior and executive health leadership roles to germinate great leaders, whether that's leading a team of fellow nurses on night duty or senior nursing executives. Nicole has over 10 years experience in the theatre, many years in education and postgraduate qualifications in nursing. Nicole, welcome to the microphone.
Thanks very much, Sue. Welcome everyone to this webinar on understanding power. We're going to go through a few elements around power and what it is, how it can be used. But ultimately, power is something that gets a bit of a bad rap, if I'm honest, where you've got someone who's leveraging something in their world and using it for evil instead of good. And we know that that happens quite a lot to us personally and professionally, because there's lots of times when you end up doing something that you didn't want to do, and really are not really sure why you're doing it or why you agreed to it, that you probably felt reasonably manipulated, possibly felt quite coerced, and somewhere in that picture is the silverback who has used power to manipulate or coerce or where you find yourself doing something that you didn't want to do. Poorly used power pushes other people into a position of weakness. So the silverback knows exactly what buttons to push so that he can put someone else in a position of weakness and service his needs over everybody else's. Very much a win-lose scenario. And it leads often that leader or the silverback who is misusing that power to be seen as autocratic and quite out of touch, rarely liked, rarely respected. And it is a short-term gig. No one wants to be lorded over. No one wants to be micromanaged. Many will ultimately start to undermine the silverback so that they can get some level of passively bought power that they use in a passive-aggressive way. And what you end up with is a culture in an organisation of blame riddled with passive-aggressive behaviours. In its worst case, then power is used in a way that bullies and harasses people. But for the most part, power is something that can either be amazing, it can be destructive, or it can be incredibly destructive to an individual to the point where it's bullying. But for the most part, it's unhelpful, or it can be used really, really well. And so when it's used really, really well, then what you get is collaboration. You get a whole stack of people who are ultimately working towards the same goal, working from the same hymn sheet, and doing really amazing things with power when it's used really well. By doing that, it's important to understand the different forms of power, and then you get to learn how to use the positive ones to their full potential and avoid the negative ones that sometimes managers can use and instinctively rely on. Anyone is capable of holding power, from the CEO of the organisation to the cleaner. Absolutely anyone is able to hold power and influence people. And so there are many of those forms that are completely unrelated to the position that you hold. And yet you still get to use power and use it well if you so choose. Doing this will result in people achieving far more than they ever thought was possible. And you'll collaborate, work well together, have happy teams, and achieving great things. But the forms of power can't be given to you. And it is something that requires you to earn them and requires a significant amount of personal investment and focus to be able to achieve this well. They last, when you use it well, it lasts longer and is much, much more rewarding. So that's part of what we're going to do today. We're going to look at the 6 power bases that are available to you. How to use those power bases for good instead of evil, and how you can build and leverage your expert power. And ultimately, as you're listening to this webinar, you can listen to it from two perspectives. If you're a senior nurse and you're in a position where you do have power, or you are a leader or manager or supervisor, then it's important to understand these power bases, because obviously it's inherent in your role that you use power well. If you don't have that position and you're a clinical nurse working on the floor, and you feel like power is perhaps used against you, then this should be really liberating for you. Because while there are some parts of power that come with positions, there is an enormous amount of power that doesn't. And so you have an equal opportunity to access power and the benefits that come with it so that you can get a good result for what is really important to you. So let's kick off the first part, which is power. What is power and what are those 6 power bases? Now, intuitively, we normally consider power as something that comes with a role, those roles of responsibility. And Frederick the Great said, "A crown is merely a hat that lets the rain in," which is one of my most favourite quotes about power and about leadership, because just because you hold the office or hold the title doesn't really mean much. So you need to do a great deal more than just turn up to a position. So as we go through these, remember that, because there are essentially, while there are 6 power bases, 3 of them come with the crown or with the position or with the office that you might hold, and 3 of them are personal, that have absolutely nothing to do with the job title you've got. So let's start off with the first one, which is legitimate power. Now, legitimate power is that where one believes they have the formal right to make demands and the expectations for others to be compliant. Now, the obvious ones are the very positional, that relates to the job or the title that you hold. So the king, who wears the crown, Frederick the Great, says that it is just a hat that lets the rain in. It does come with an expectation that when you are the king, when you are the Pope, when you are the President of the United States, then you do have the formal right to make demands and the expectations of others to be compliant. These are roles that make laws, so compliance is obviously critical to the use of that power. But CEOs have that same legitimate power in that they hold a formal right to make demands of those who work in the organisation to be compliant. But of course, other roles within organisations do as well. After-hours coordinators hold a legitimate power. Nurse unit manager, the shift coordinator, the team leader in a team nursing scenario, all of these roles have legitimate power, where they have the formal right to say, you, because you are beneath me in the organisational structure, or you report directly to me, I expect you to do this, and for that you will get paid. You will be compliant and we will pay you for your work. The downside of this sort of power, which is the fundamental problem with any positional power, i.e. those powers that come with the position that you hold, is they are unpredictable and unstable. Because the minute you lose your title and the crown comes off, then your power goes with it. People are influenced by the office and not by you personally. The director of nursing has said it's so, and so you have to respect the director of nursing. Now, the fact that you think she is just the worst and a terrible example of how you should behave, or that you think she's got no clinical credibility, or you may have a million opinions on that. Same as with Malcolm Turnbull. Very likely you may not have voted for him. So therefore, as a person, you have no respect, no time for him, don't disagree with his policies, don't disagree with his positions on most things, but he has the legitimate power, so we must be compliant with the laws that he puts out. And so, but the minute that his title's gone, then we don't have to listen to him anymore. And so that's the same with us. The minute the nurse manager isn't the nurse manager or the director of nursing, then there's no need to be compliant to that person's assertions. Also, the scope is highly limited. and that people are, have to behave or be compliant in a very slim, limited number of ways that they have the right to control you. So the after hours coordinator can pull or deploy you to another ward, but they can't control that you're just a moody cow when you get there unless you are outrageous and become inappropriate and he behaves inappropriate. But if you want to be, you know, difficult and truculent and obstructive, then the after hours coordinator has absolutely no control or power over you to be able to do that and be compliant until you break the rules. Then the power kicks in again. So the positional power styles have some disadvantages in terms of how much you can use them. The next one is the reward power. Now this is the use of power by using the carrot as opposed to the stick. So it is those people who believe that their power comes from their ability to compensate others for compliance. Again, usually positional, in that it comes with the job that you hold and your ability to access rewards that you can give out. Now, those rewards might be raises, promotions. In our world, it might be better patient allocations, training opportunities, and of course, often forgotten, praise and thanks. Generally, it is transactional. If I give you this, then you will give me that. Or because you gave me this, I'll reward you with that. Very dependent on the position. The cleaner in the hospital has very little control to deliver rewards. Obviously, in our world, we have also surprisingly little power over what rewards we can access. There's no Wolf of Wall Street where we can have the boss's boat for the weekend, or we can, you know, have this position comes with a gorgeous apartment on the river for this job. There's very little rewards that we have in our worlds. We are fairly limited to things like patient allocations, training opportunities, praise and thanks. So all in all, if you want to use the reward power, it's a pretty weak power position, because once you've used up your rewards, then your power weakens. Also, when a reward is overdone, then your power weakens. And I don't know how many coffee and cake vouchers I've given out in my world, how many movie tickets, how many pizzas for the PM shift that I've given out. And eventually people look at me like they'd like to put my coffee and cake voucher quite somewhere else when I start handing it out, because eventually it just doesn't mean anything. So it is also a very unstable, unpredictable source of power. The next type is expert power. Now this is something that does not rely on the position that you hold. It is something that you personally gain. You can choose to invest in your level of expertise, and it's based on your high level of skills and knowledge. You don't have to have a particular job. If you're an AIN in an organisation and you want to be an RN one day, then you can invest in a high level of skills and knowledge so that you can make that journey from AIN to RN. It doesn't require you to be an RN first. So it is entirely up to you. Skills, knowledge and competency define it. When you understand a situation well, using those skills, knowledge and competencies, then you use logic and rational decision making to outperform others. That's ultimately the part about that power. You outperform others with that high level of skill, knowledge and competency. When you have this power, people respect you, you become a subject matter expert, your ideas have value, others look toward you for advice and direction, and you behave with confidence and decisiveness. One of the most important things is that you build reputation that has nothing to do with the job that you hold, only to do with the amount of investment that you put into skills, knowledge and competency. And that's that notion of when people say, when you build brand in your organisation, that I become known as the subject matter expert for my clinical niche, whether for me, Obviously, my background is in operating theatres. So in those days, then I built brand in that I was a highly expert nurse that knew how to scrub for anything in neuro and orthopedics. And so people knew that about me because I had invested a lot of time and energy in building those skills. This type of power is massive in nursing. And we know that because the clinical cream rises to the top and often get promoted to positions of power. Unfortunately for those people where that expert power is recognised, there is an enormous gap in then using that expert power and transitioning into a robust, well-rounded leader. And so we often rely entirely on our expert knowledge, skills and expertise and then fall on our face when there's not a lot of direction after. But nevertheless, this power is enormous in nursing, which is why the clinical cream rises to the top. It is a really powerful foundation for leadership. It is but that, a foundation only. And you haven't yet arrived in the fullness of your potential for power, and that's absolutely okay, but it is an amazing foundation. So doesn't matter what position you hold in that, you can be the most amazing cleaner and you will be known for that. There was a couple of cleaners around the place that would come and they would come and do the emergency department and you'd be like, oh yes, it's Luca. She's fantastic. Thank God she's the one that's come and sorted out our terminal clean. I know she's going to do a really good job, as opposed to some of the others. Same with the orderlies in the organisation. I knew the orderlies that were going to come in and give us their full skills, knowledge, competency and turn up. They were really going to be in. Whereas the others that were pretty rubbish, it was just about outcome. So you don't need to be the CEO to have expert power. In fact, quite the opposite. We had a maintenance guy in one of the hospitals I worked with, Gordy, and he was an exceptional handyman. But he was that. He wasn't an engineer. He didn't have qualifications. He wasn't a plumber or an electrician. He was a handyman. And the entire organisation knew Gordy. And he used that expert power by knowing everything in the organisation. And we knew him well, respected him. You look for him. When one of the other handymen came, you're like, oh, geez, I don't know if this thing's going to get fixed. You'd give him a call. I mean, he was a raging gossip. So sometimes he used his power in different ways. But from an expert power point of view, didn't matter that he was the handyman in the organisation. He was actually one of the most powerful people in the organisation because he did know everybody and everything in the organisation. The next one is the referent. Now, this is the one, again, personal. In fact, it makes absolutely no difference who's in what position you hold. And it comes from someone's attractiveness or worthiness or right to others' respect. It is effectively your likability scale. If you're likable, then you get more power. When you like and respect people, then you get a lot more power. It comes from these people who hold this natural ability to hold this referent power in that they identify with people. They've got a unique gift to be able to read people and be really relatable. They don't walk in and start talking about the Porsche that they bought on the weekend and how fabulous it is to drive, and everyone's like, I've got my beat up old Toyota at the back, but thanks for mentioning it. They really know how to be relatable with people. Celebrities have referent power and they can influence what you buy, who you vote for. The Instagram people that have got 3 million followers are the people that you go, oh, okay. So they use the Thermomix. Oh, wow. Let me have a look at that thing then. They have a unique ability because you like them and they relate to you, that they have an ability to influence what you do, how you behave, what you wear, who you vote for, what you buy, what you choose to say. Everything about your life can be influenced by people with reference power. In the workplace, it's a person who makes you feel good and that they're often funny, relatable, got a really great gift of the gab, and so you instantly give them a lot of influence. It relies purely on your personality and never in the position, and it can be easily abused, really easily abused. This is one of the powers that's personal that doesn't need to be earned, like expert power. It's often what you You just have it or you don't. It can be built on, and we'll talk about that later, but often people with this power, they just have it. They've got that X factor. And they're gifted with the personality. That's why the gift of the gab is a phrase, because it is a gift. If you can hold a conversation and be the hostess with the mostess, then what comes with that is referent power. People who lack integrity, that have this sort of power, will use their power for evil. They will alienate those that they don't like. They will form cliques. They will make others that are different feel uncomfortable and eventually pushed out and isolated. They will use other forms of power, which we'll talk about in a tick, really well, but not for good reasons, for nefarious reasons. And they'll be the ones that are doing the scuttlebutt in the corridors and the DD conversations and all of that sort of thing that happens. Rife potential for nepotism and the boys club. Not great for longevity. If you're just going to rely on your power of referent power, then it's probably not going to get you a long way in life unless you couple it up with another form of power. The next one is coercive. So the coercive is the big stick, as opposed to the reward, which is the carrot. Coercive is the stick. You use threat or punishment to get people to do what you want. You might imply that they'll get sacked, or they'll get a demotion, or you'll deny them privileges. It is highly questionable whether anyone has the justification to use this. And there are certainly times when one punishes. If you have a staff member in your world who's given a almost lethal dose as a result of a drug error, then you must take some level of punishment or action around that. And that's a fine way to use it. Is it still okay to threaten them with sacking? I don't know. If you're using it for power, then no. If you're using it to say, look, honesty, this is maybe what will happen is that we may not be able to continue your employment because it was such a serious thing, in terms of showing your hands and being honest, then yes. But if you're using it to coerce them to do something, it is even then highly questionable use of power. So of course this is a very questionable and significant opportunity for this power base to be abused. And it is directly related to job dissatisfaction and resentment, often mistaken, but probably more likely is the form of bullying that we see, and relates to the position held. It's very difficult for the cleaner to coerce you into doing something. It's very easy for a nurse manager or a CEO to have and they need the position to be able to misuse this sort of power. So it's hard. It has to be generally related to the position. The last one is informational power, and again relates to position, unless you find the information by accident. And it comes from the ability of someone to control information that they possess to accomplish something. So it comes from a situation where you are in control of information that others don't necessarily have. It is very significant an opportunity for use of power in nursing, in that I know something about this patient that I'll share with you when I'm good and ready. Might be an example of informational power used in a not so great way, in a more evil way. My background in operating theatres, this kind of informational power is used massively. And in all operating theatres everywhere in this country, there are folders with all of the doctors' names in it and the procedures. So there will be Dr. Andrews shoulder arthroscopy, Dr. Andrews shoulder replacement, Dr. Andrews knee arthroscopy. And in there is everything that you need that he prefers. He likes this set of drapes, he likes this instrument tray, he likes these sutures, he likes these dressings. There's all a big blur about surgeons' preferences. Informational power by the nurses that would often do, say, Dr. Andrews' list, would be that they would never update those preference cards because they had all of that knowledge in their head. They didn't need to put it down on a piece of paper. So when they went away on holidays and everyone got 1987's preference cards out, and it was a disaster, then the surgeon would be roaring bloody murder about what a disaster the list was. And then that nurse would come in from holidays and the doctor would say, oh, so glad you're back. It was a nightmare without you. You're the only one that can do this list. And that nurse thinks, it's me, and feels very self-satisfied, very, very powerful. Excellent misuse of information and power. So it is a very big thing in nursing for nurses to be able to do that. It is when you're the keeper of knowledge and you're in that unique position to keep it or give it. Nurse educators hold informational, confidential, uniquely specific information about the skills, knowledge and performance of every individual in their unit. So they get to use that power, so that information, so that they can help and support you, but they could use it not so well as well. Nurse managers hold uniquely confidential information about an organisation's performance or when major changes are afoot. And so they need to keep that knowledge and decide when to use it so that they can help the organisation navigate those challenges effectively. Or they can use it poorly or in a more evil way by dropping little bombs and not really giving them all the information and then getting everyone frightened, and then it almost goes into a bit more coercive. Clinical nurses who are on the floor hold uniquely confidential patient information that they can decide to share with their colleagues or not. In a team nursing situation, if you know something about the patient or you know that the doctor has just been and changed the orders, if you want to rattle the cage, then you can keep that information or you can share it so everyone's on the same boat. So it is a particularly potent form of power. And it's not the information itself that's powerful. It's the fact that you have it and someone else doesn't. And you can withhold, manipulate, distort, conceal. You can use it to help others. You can use it as a weapon. You can use it as a bargaining tool. So the fact that you have something that others don't have in terms of information is where the power is. So they're the main forms of power that we can see. And as you can see in the world, you can't think of a situation where you may have been coerced or manipulated into a situation that you couldn't hang on one of those four forms. So the question is when you're leveraging that to use it for good instead of evil, which is the important part. Now, I've talked about this McClelland's theory of motivation before in other webinars, but this is a notion that was developed in the 1960s and says that people identify with three key motivators. One of them is achievement, that there are a certain number of nurses that you work with or work for you, or that you have some level of positional power over, that this subset of people are motivated by a strong desire to accomplish challenging goals. They're happy to take calculated risks. They love feedback on their achievements and often like to work alone. So those people are the ones that are just the clinical powerhouses. What floats their boat is amazing patient care, doing cutting edge stuff, knowing all about the world that is happening in their clinical niche. And they're really motivated by being great nurses and knowing everything. The other subset of the people that you work with are going to be motivated by affiliation, that they want to belong to a group, that they want to be liked, they want to go with the flow, they want to collaborate, not compete, and they don't like uncertainty and risk. So they're the people that run the social club, that actually come to work because they like working with the team, and the patients are entirely secondary. They love to be the social butterflies and are in the nurses station telling great stories because they want to be a part of a tribe. And the other people are motivated by power. They want control and they want to influence. They want to win arguments. They want to compete and they want status and recognition. So when you look at those three, when you're using power for evil instead of good, then you can see that when we go back a couple of slides and look at those power styles, then those certain people are going to be influenced by certain power styles. Now, legitimate power, you're going to either give to or use for those people who are actually motivated by power. but it's not going to be very helpful for the people that are affiliated and just want to be there for the team and want to be part of a tribe, unless it's good for everybody. Reward power is going to be great provided it rewards the team for the affiliated people. But those who want accomplishment and power are going to enjoy a reward power that's used well. Expert power is going to be massive for the people that are motivated by accomplishment. Massive for, quite good for the affiliated, but probably difficult for the power because they're going to feel some level of competition with it. So you need to be careful with that one possibly. Referent power obviously is the heartland of the affiliations. They're one-on-one with that. Referent power, where you're influenced by people's power of respect, it's probably going to work okay with all three, actually. I don't think there's anyone that's going to like being coerced. And for informational power, when you have information and you share it with others and then you are open and collaborative and you use that well, is going to be useful for all of them as well. The tribe's going to want to share and have everyone brainstorm and collaborate. And the people who are motivated by achievement are going to want the same. And the people who are affiliated with power are going to be delighted to have the new piece of information. So it's important to use the right power at the right time. But in particular with that, using it for the right way. There's a high need for allowing competition sometimes, but not always when there's goal-oriented projects. And so you can use that really effectively for them. But for you, where are you going to invest? Now, expert power is probably your most obvious place to invest, but it's not necessarily the only one. But ultimately, the ideal leaders, and for those ideal people that are influencing their world, possess power from expert power and referent power. It is a combination of both. And when we look at both of those, then that expert power, then there's a certain few things that you need to do. Because after all, knowledge is power. And so when we build expert skills, knowledge and competency, we're in a unique position to influence others, whether we're the CEO or whether we're the cleaner. And we are in a unique position to build a really great team or contribute to a really great team and foster collaboration. And to not have to rely on a position giving us that power. If we invest in ourselves, then we're going to invest in that power. So how to build the expert power? The first thing is to portray the image of an expert. Now, of all the leaders and influential people that walk the earth, 38% of them use expert power, and they exercise control by perfecting their knowledge, both in professional and personal lives, and they exercise watertight thinking, which is extremely important to experts. And that's the image of the expert, is that they are watertight thinking, they have an expert knowledge. They know everything there is to know about ICU, if that's their clinical niche. They're secure in their expertise because they present hard data and logic, and they gain consensus and buy-in by using that logic. And they're great individual contributors because of their pursuit to quality improvement and efficiency and perfection. Now, arguably, to be an expert, then it's mooted that you need 10,000 hours to be an expert. Now, if we're working full-time, a full-time employee works 1,976 hours a year. So that means really 5 years in that same niche for you to be considered an expert. So that's a long time that you have spent in that world, building brand, building reputation, building skills, knowledge, expertise. And you have gained a lot of trends, facts, figures, notoriety about what's happening. And you self-promote that as the image of the expert via what education you've done and the experience that you have. Now, in the old days, that's why we wore badges and epaulets. so that we could demonstrate our image that was uniquely identifiable as I walked down the ward corridor, is that I had a certain number of badges or certain configuration of epaulets, and you could tell who I was just by looking at my uniform. It's the thing that we used to say as, oh, she's the triple certificated sister, because she had general, mid and psych. And so there was a badge or an epaulette or something to determine that I held that level of the image of the expert because I was uniquely identifiable. We don't do that anymore. It's also why doctors have their degrees and their Royal College memberships on the wall when you go in to have the consultation, so that you can uniquely identify who they are. That's why they wear the stethoscope. After all, an orthopaedic surgeon hasn't used a stethoscope since 1964. So why they're wearing the stethoscope is nothing but an image, portraying the image of an expert. When you go onto a website, you'll see the logos of the companies that have used their service. And so there'll be the company logo of Microsoft and Google and Apple and Coca-Cola, because they're saying these people use my service. And it gives social proof of credibility because they want to display the image of the expert. It's important for you to find a unique, organic way to do that without sounding weird and obnoxious. But we are a bit limited in nursing given the corporate nature of a uniform, even moving to scrubs. The fact that we don't have an office to put our walls on or a website to put our logos on makes it a bit different. But we still need to self-promote who we are. And sometimes even getting a LinkedIn profile is enough to do that, so that we can do that. But whatever it is that you need to do, then you need to display that image of the expert. Maintaining credibility at all costs is really important. It's taking you 10,000 hours to get here, probably some level of formal education other than your undergrad, and likely an enormous amount of time you've invested and money you've invested in continuous professional development. Maintaining that credibility at all costs is important. Foolish errors, indulgent moments of cracking it over something relatively little can ruin your power in a nanosecond. It's why people always say to you, oh, don't put anything dodgy on your Facebook profile, it follows you. Because all you need to is having your rave on a Sunday night and being out ridiculously outrageous or arrested somewhere, then all of a sudden people go, oh, is she really an expert? People are really quick to judge about who you are and remove that image of the expert. So maintaining that credibility is really important. Public stoushes in the nurses' station, misusing that power will kill your power, kill your position in an instant. So follow those rules of being a professional at all times. It's also acting decisively in a crisis will build your expert power. If people look for a leader who steps up, takes control when there's a problem. I remember as an after hours coordinator when I would go around and the expert nurses, not necessarily the ones that held the position, but they were team leading or they were taking a role for the odd night, the ones that were freaking out about staffing and about getting an extra patient felt like they were stepping up and defending their colleagues, but actually what they were doing was just falling apart and being a big emotional puddle and being really outrageous. They felt they were advocating. But of course the others looked at them and thought, geez, if Angela can't cope, what hope do we have? It's important in a position of crisis or stress that you don't express doubt, confusion, but you're overtly emotional, whether that's angry, freaking out, having a meltdown, but you take a position of power, and that is that you are controlled, that you communicate, and that you act professionally. And when you act decisively, then that's how people go, geez, did you see how good she was in that situation? She really knows her stuff. It's amazing the power that will bring you. You've got 10,000 hours in a clinical niche. So you need to stay informed. It dries up really quickly. Know the funky new trends in the literature. Own your space as the subject matter expert. Know the developments in your field. Belong to your niche's professional association. Be connected. Read books outside your niche, outside nursing, and then take those principles and apply it to your world. Read blogs, go to courses. Staying informed demonstrates that you're an expert who keeps your finger on the pulse. Recognise others. The big danger with people that use expert power is that you're a my way or the highway because I know best. That's the danger of expert power. There's no such thing as a free lunch. There's always a downside. People will look to you for direction. So don't be one of those my way or the highway goats, because they'll just go, what a ridiculous person. Always allow people to be truly heard. They bring a perspective that you can apply to your expertise together and maybe come up with something really unique and special. Experts tend to view collaboration as a total waste of time because they're the ones that have seen it all and done it all. The greatest risk to this is expert error, where you've done a task in your niche 5 million times, so you don't necessarily think through every single step. Now, it's problematic because you are so completely sure you're right. Now, there's some great examples of expert error. Thomas Watson in the 60s was the chairman of IBM at that time, who thought there could only be a small market for computers. In fact, just a handful for the entire world. Couldn't be more wrong. Steve Jobs' idea for the PC was summarily dismissed by ATAR and HP, Hewlett Packard, because Steve Jobs didn't have a degree. So they just went, no, you can't possibly know because you're not an expert. So just wiped him. Isn't that a mistake? A Yale professor gave a young Fred Smith, who invented FedEx in America, a C for his assignment at Yale for overnight delivery mail service, because he wrote, in order to get higher than a C, the idea needed to be feasible. The Yale guy was the expert, so overnight delivery was impossible, and so gave him a C. So recognising others who aren't experts is really, really important. And it flows on, therefore, that you manage people's self-esteem. You might be the expert and the powerhouse, but don't be arrogant about it. People's self-esteem is really easily hurt by when you just wipe them and go, lol, no, go back to your baby novice ways, please, and I'll tell you what to do. They'll frequently have an opinion of less of people, and will you have the risk of treating those people with contempt. So be really, really cautious. There's a quote of a CEO who said, I don't do feelings, I'll leave that to Barry Manilow. I'm putting to you that he didn't have a great culture, that people felt very disenfranchised by that. So don't be superior, don't be arrogant. The professional is altruistic and they share knowledge willingly and they mentor. And so that's why expert power will only get you so far. And so you have to really invest in that referent power as well, where you use and develop your people skills. A boss has a title, a leader has the people. Now, if you're in a position where you're using power, and even if that's you're using in team nursing, then you can use power. And some people have the gift of the gab, and so they can easily connect that with expert power and be really influential people in your culture. But if that's not necessarily you and you're not the fabulous extrovert who's the hostess or the mostess naturally, then there are ways to invest in this referent power as well. And one of them is get hold of emotional intelligence and really invest in understanding how powerful that's going to be. Because the referent power creates a positive work environment, focuses on those deliverables, not just what we're ticking boxes. Separate people from problems, have a sensitivity relationships, and are really open to feedback for themselves as well. And to do that, you need emotional intelligence. Also, learn by collaboration. Our worlds are complex, integrated, connected, labyrinthine worlds where you make one decision on the cardiac ward and it's going to make make an impact on EC, and it's going to make an impact on the recovery unit, and it has knock-on effects. Our worlds are really complicated. So people have something to contribute. And even if they're not the expert, they can still bring a unique perspective. So be comfortable with ambiguity and be comfortable with the fact that you can listen and interpret and relate what other ideas bring, and your expertise will be able to connect that. Delegate, listen to people. Be someone who inspires. Be really inspirational and aspirational. Don't just be constrained by what the possibilities. Make people feel like they've arrived in the healthcare world to save lives and make a difference. Don't feel like that's cliche and that we've burnt ourselves out to be, cynical old women and men that just think, oh God, it's also 5 minutes ago, just do your job. Be really inspirational. People want to be a part of something special. Be positive. Be a role model and practice what you preach. That's usually something pretty intuitive, I think. Build trust with people. Nurses are the most trusted profession, and they have been for decades and decades. So we've already got a pretty fertile ground. For some reason, when we connect with each other, then we don't often, and that whole nurses eat their young thing is prolific. So is the being burnt out because people are jaded. Is it possible that people have misused their power? Very possibly. So invest in trust. When people are in a trusting relationship and professional relationship with each other and their teams, they're really happy to shout out ideas that people aren't going to treat them with contempt. They're really happy to be engaged. They really want to turn up and work. They're not just getting handover, getting paid, going home. They're really engaged. And when you're engaged, you're a lot more productive. And in fact, in organisations that have got trust in them and a team that's trust that people are using power for good instead of evil, then people are 50% more productive. That means if our ratios are 1 to 4, that in a trusting environment where you've got a great group of people that trust each other, where power is used really effectively, then you can give them another 2 patients. And they'll go, yes, thank you, good, I'll nail it. As opposed to, well, no, I'm walking. So trust is really powerful. And you don't need to be the hostess with the mostess and have the gift of the gab to build trust. Defend your people in a crisis in a powerful way, assuming a powerful position, advocating for their rights. Don't have a meltdown. Act decisively. Be powerful. Advocate for people in a rational, logical way. Delegate to people and support them to be able to do that. And one of the most amazing things is to celebrate wins. We often walk away and go, oh, good, she did that, and never say to her, how good are you looking after that patient that was really challenging? We never do that. We just go, oh, good, patient didn't die. Let's go home. Celebrate wins. Be really heavy on the praise. Thank people. Have fun. Don't let the fun die. Have loads and loads of fun with people. No one's going to die from having fun. But celebrate that, and that power means that you're going to build a department where you collaborate, where people are really engaged and they're really fun, and it's a truly great place to work. And I think that's what we all want, is a truly great place to work. So where to from here for you now is a mission for you. It's got 2 steps. Watch your work life. Watch the interactions of others. Watch the interactions of your mum. Watch the interaction of your after-hours coordinator, of the senior nurses. And for a little experiment, jot them down or stick them in one of those 6 power bases and consider whether that worked well or whether it didn't. Do the same in your home life as well. Watch the interactions with people when you go to your tax person that has a certain level of expert power, and see how that looks and feels, and whether it was useful or not useful, and whether they used contempt, that you don't know anything about tax, or they were really supportive in showing you opportunities for how you could better leverage the situation. Watch it in your relationships with your older siblings who use power, because positional power. Watch all of those and think about where they sit in those 6 power bases. When you're in a position to influence people, think about which of the 6 power bases you use, and then think about the ones that you've observed and which ones you liked and which ones were enjoyable and why. Which ones do you defer to? The last thing that you need to do is watch a TED Talk, and her name is Amy Cuddy, Cuddy. And she does an amazing set of TED Talks. There's some YouTube videos that she talks about powerful positions and power posing. And as woo-woo as it sounds, there are women and probably men across Australia, probably across the world now that TED Talks had 40 million views or something, where they're standing in the toilet before a meeting they feel intimidated by, assuming the position of Wonder Woman, because research has shown that it reduces cortisol and stress, and it reinvigorates the brain to be rational and empowers you to use the expert knowledge that you have and the reverent knowledge and power that you already have to make a real difference. So it can make a difference for you as well in using power and combating power that may be used against you. So I hope that's been helpful, and I'll see you in one of my next webinars.